Welcome to the Professional Muslim Women Podcast, a place for working Muslim women to share their stories, struggles, triumphs, and lessons learned along the way in pursuit of their careers. I'm Dr. Kali Hussein.
And I'm Dr. Hani Ahmed. And in this podcast, we bring inspirational, trailblazing, successful, and fulfilled professional Muslim women to you.
Get ready to be inspired and learn how you can forge your own path as well. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Welcome back to Professional Muslim Women's Podcast. And today's topic is to wear or not to wear the hijab.
Dum, dum, dum. It's a big topic, and we have a lot to talk about, but we thought this was a very important, very relevant subject about wearing the hijab at work.
Exactly. So the hijab for a lot of women is a point of contention. Not only, is it a personal decision, but it's also a decision that everybody else, thinks they have a say in.
Oh, that's
right?
so true. Lots of opinions.
Exactly. So it starts off when, in the home with parents and relatives, telling you which way you should go. And then as an adult, when you, make the decision either way, strangers, Muslims, non-Muslims,
Yeah.
everybody thinks, it's their right to show you the right path.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
If you're not conforming with, whatever their beliefs or their practices are, where, if you're not wearing it, we say, may God show you the right path. And we tell women, they need help with their decision.
Yeah, exactly. And then on the other side of things, because the hijab has become so politicized, there's also like society at large that has their opinion, right? Which is mostly an opposing force. So as a young Muslim woman, you have kind of like these two forces, and somehow in there, you have to rely on yourself, your connection to God, and make that, very personal decision.
Right. And I think that's one of the things that, we kind of want to talk about today and emphasize, if you get anything out of this conversation today, is that ultimately it is a woman's decision.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
And in Islam, we believe that whatever decisions we make, Allah gave us, free will. And with that free will, the decision to wear or not to wear the hijab, it's between us and Allah.
Right. There's no compulsion in religion. Absolutely.
Exactly.
So let's get into it. Ali, as a professional Muslim woman, you are a hijab wearing Muslim woman. So tell me, when did you start wearing hijab, and what was that decision, when you came to that decision to do it?
So I first wore the hijab when I was in high school. So It was my junior year of high school that I actually thought about it and made the decision that was how I felt most comfortable.
You didn't wear it as a child?
No. So as a child, the experience that I had, especially in middle school, is I was told to wear it and basically forced to wear it by people who didn't practice it, completely. So, my parents never forced it. They taught us, the Quran and, our religion. But as an adult, they said, these are what we believe is right. Whatever decision you make is yours. But I had, other family members who would kind of force it and say, you have to wear it. So, as any young junior high girl will probably tell you, I would wear it in front of people. But when I went to school, I had my hair done. That was junior high.
Yep.
But when I was in junior, I started feeling that, I didn't feel comfortable, right? I would get my hair done and, my interaction with boys my age and, how comfortable they just felt to talk to me and to approach me and to, try things. I never felt comfortable.
Okay.
Right. And it was the winter break in my junior year that I really sat down and thought about. I'm like, okay, what do I want to be? As an adult, I knew I wanted to be a doctor. I knew, what I wanted to be. And I kind of visualized myself as an adult. And I had on a white coat because I wanted to be a doctor. But at the same time, I was wearing a hijab.
Okay.
So that confirmed for me the fact that the reason I felt uncomfortable was because I felt like I would be more comfortable and more myself if I wore the hijab.
Wow.
Like I've always dressed modestly, even when I didn't wear a hijab, I had my shirt was always buttoned all the way up to my neck. I just looked awkward,
Oh yeah.
without the hijab. I felt like something was missing.
You didn't feel like yourself.
I
Yeah.
didn't feel like
Yeah.
myself. And then I started wearing the hijab. I remember coming back, from break in January, and
Hmm.
everybody was like, whoa, what
Yeah.
changed? And it was funny because I felt a change in how my classmates interacted with me. Like the same boys who would, be forthcoming would, hold themselves back and say, some of them knew I was Muslim at that time. Like it's confirmed for them because I'm visually Muslim now.
Yeah.
And they would be like, Salam alaikum, sister.
Yeah. Isn't that
And they
amazing?
weren't even
Yeah.
Muslims, right? So for me, that was like, okay, by wearing my hijab, people automatically know, how to approach me, and they know that, I have certain sets of beliefs,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
and at that point, I came out of my shell. I started, becoming more comfortable. I started speaking up for myself. I started, in a class where I was usually quiet, I started, debating with my classmates who I disagreed with. So for me, the hijab made me, more comfortable and more confident.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting? And so cool. In a way, it's part of your identity that, you want for yourself. You feel more comfortable. It was kind of like a protection in a way, and it allowed you to almost be in control of how people approach you.
That's
Yeah.
exactly how I felt about it. And the fact that it made me more confident is what allowed me to basically keep pursuing my goals. When I finished high school, I went to college in Texas.
Yeah.
And my first year of college was when 9/11 happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember our campus where I went to school was known for, being very political.
Really?
And
Okay, that's
oh,
interesting.
yeah, I mean,
Because
they would have,
yeah, you went to
yeah,
school in like the South, right? You
in
were,
the South, yeah, in
yeah.
Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And they used to have, I remember one of the events that happened was they used to have a bake sale, and they would have baked goods and they would price them and charge students based on their ethnicity.
Okay.
And they would say, oh, we're doing our stand against affirmative action. So if you were, Caucasian, you'd pay 25 cents. If you
Okay.
were Asian, you'd pay 50 cents. If you were Hispanic, you'd pay 75 cents. And if you were African American, you'd pay $1.
Wow. Wow. Oh my
Like, so
goodness.
they were like, oh, we're the young Republicans of Texas, and this is how we feel about affirmative action. Like, so those kind of things were going on.
Oh wow.
So
Yeah.
my freshman year is when 9/11 happened. And I remember as soon as it happened, I lived with my brother off campus, and he
Mm-hmm.
called me and he said, they're blaming Muslims,
Yeah.
take off your hijab.
Yeah. Right. He
And
was worried about you. He was
he was
concerned.
very he was
Yeah.
very worried about me. And I told him, I'm like, no, I'm gonna stay inside this building. And he came to pick me up, and I was like, I'm not gonna take off my hijab just because, they're blaming Muslims. And, we stayed home and all classes were canceled. And the next few days we were watching TV, and within our town there
Mm-hmm.
were, mosques being burned.
Oh my
We
goodness.
had Islamic studies professors who, students were going and spitting in his face. So things like that were happening. And in that time, I mean, I remember him telling me, either take off your hijab or don't go to school. And I
Hmm.
told him, I'm like, I'm going to stay at home. And, once things cool down, I'll go back to class. And I went back to class, a few days later. But
Wow. Subhanallah. What a hardship.
it comes down to safety. But that's how uncomfortable I felt.
Yeah.
I said, yes, it's going to put me in danger, but I did not feel comfortable. Like, I still do not feel comfortable, taking off my hijab, because it is a part of who I am. It is my identity. It is,
Yeah.
how I choose to practice my religion. And it's part of who I am. Like, that's what
Yeah.
Islam is, right? It's not
Yeah.
just a religion, it's a way of life.
It's a way of life. Absolutely. Wow. So, 9/11 was definitely a difficult time for Muslims all around the US because of the step up that occurred, in hate crime immediately following
Yeah.
that period of time. There was, concern for your safety, for your own personal safety. We were worried about that. Lots of parents were worried about their children, especially the women, because, I feel like as a minority individual, being a hijab Muslim woman, you really, stick out and you're so visible and you're
Yep.
carrying all of that. And, it really becomes a matter of safety. So you trained in Texas, you were wearing a hijab, you are training in a professional field. What were some of the obstacles? Like, can you think of a situation or scenario where, you faced prejudice?
When didn't I?
Oh, right.
So, some of them are entertaining. Like
Mhm.
now, I mean, looking back at them, they're very entertaining. Other ones are just, so it started out, I think when I was interviewing for medical school, I remember sitting in an interview where this lady basically all she talked about was my hijab.
Oh,
right?
wow. Okay.
So my qualifications for getting into, med school, what field I wanted to
Mm.
pursue, why I wanted to do medicine, none of those things were relevant.
Really?
She basically sat there and talked about how the hijab is a cultural thing. It has nothing to do with religion. I have no idea how to practice my own faith.
Wow.
And she just sat there and lectured me. I
Wow.
remember coming out and everybody else talking about the questions that they got. And they asked me, "What were you asked?" And I told them, I was like, "I didn't get asked any questions. This lady just lectured me." And all of them, like all the students, all the applicants, were just horrified. And they were like,
Yeah.
"You can't do that.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
need to report her." And I'm looking at them, I'm like, "To who?"
Right.
you know?
Right.
So that's one of the things that I've kind of become used to is that, everybody feels comfortable and okay to say those inappropriate, sometimes illegal things,
Yeah.
especially to minorities, because that is the question, who do you report it to?
Yeah.
When you're applying
Absolutely.
to medical school, you're applying to residency, you are looking to get accepted and,
Right.
advisable to start raising a big stink when someone offends you.
Yeah, that
Right?
is so true. It's an easier said than done process to actually, bring to light this type of, like is it microaggression? It's not all the way like a forceful, violent,
Mm.
prejudice. But at the same time, it's definitely
Yeah.
prejudice and it's definitely wrong. But
Yeah,
it's
I
like,
mean,
how do I address it?
yeah, it's these little microaggressions that maintain the status quo and that maintain, these kind of things that keep them happening over and over and over. So at that point, I'm like, okay, the only thing I can do is either not rank this program or rank it at the bottom of my list. And that's what I ended up doing. I just ranked it at the very bottom of my list. And this is one of the main reasons I kind of, now after being done with everything is raising these points is because unless people who've gone through it stand up and say, hey, these things are not appropriate. That's why I feel so strongly about talking about pregnancy and residency and in training, how people feel comfortable talking about all kinds of things. I think we're going to have a whole nother podcast talking about that.
Yeah, tell me about it.
um,
Yeah. Hmm.
but these microaggressions, the way they happen and they, how the scale at which they happen
Right.
is the reason underrepresented minorities continue to be underrepresented, is
Right.
because the system is set up to keep them out. I like to call it like a filter,
Yeah.
coming through this interview process, going through these trainings. The kind of things that you have to go through are kind of, there to filter people out, to filter out people who won't stand for that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
right?
Which makes it all the more ironic that you're going to school with these, Republican white students who feel like they are the ones who are at a disadvantage. It's comical because they have no idea, what you went through to get there, that you had to have, that you're working harder, that in most cases, just getting beyond the expectations of all these people around you. Oftentimes, you're there because you're smarter, you deserved your seat, let's put it that way. So it's strange to me then when the majority population feels like they are disadvantaged because they're seeing more than one or two minorities in the school.
Yeah, and they blame all the, oh, you're, token this or token that. And,
Right.
like if that was the case, then there's a lot of reasons why underrepresented minorities remain underrepresented, right?
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
that was the first time. And then I think when I got into medical school, it was, one of the reasons, like I remember very vividly trying to get into the operating room when I was third year medical student. I think I was doing my clinical rotations. And I remember we were getting oriented by a resident, and this lady, a nurse, comes from, down the hall just screaming at us and wondering, okay, what did we do?
Right.
And she comes to us and starts yelling at me and saying, "You are not allowed to be here."
Oh, wow. Wow.
And I'm like,
Okay.
"What did I do?" I'm like, "I'm going through orientation. I haven't even touched anything. I didn't,
Right.
you know." And
Not
she's,
operating.
yeah, I'm like, "We're right outside of the operating room." And she said, "You are not allowed to be here with that thing on your head."
Oh my goodness.
And it just flabbergasted,
Wow.
my resident, and the rest of the medical students just moved along and continued with the orientation, and I just had to stand there and deal with this nurse yelling at me because I was wearing a hijab near the operating room.
Yeah.
And one of the oldest medical schools in the state of Texas. And when I asked her, I'm like, "Okay, what do you want me to do? How do you suppose?" And she's like, "I don't know, you just can't be here with this." And I'm like, I had to come up with something. I'm like, "Okay, do you want me to take one of the paper hats and just put it on top of my head?" And she's like, "Yeah, I guess that'll be fine." They
Yeah.
had absolutely no idea what to do with a medical student wearing a hijab, right?
It's unbelievable. Yeah.
And, their first inclination is to yell at me and kick me out of the
And
operating room.
kick you out, yeah, and shut you out of the process. It's really incredible. So, dealing with this on a regular basis, tell me, where did you find the strength, the fortitude? Like, how did you get through these obstacles?
So for the longest time, I used to just say, keep my head down and just keep on trekking along,
Yeah,
right? I knew, from the moment that I put my hijab on that, and I've been asked a lot, for people who knew that I was pursuing medicine,
yeah,
specifically surgery, and I think they kind of prepared me in asking me these challenging questions.
right,
They would say, what if you were asked to take off your hijab? And I
right.
told them I would not do it. Like, if a field requires me to be not who I am, then I don't belong in that field,
Mashallah.
right?
Yeah,
If they're going to ask me to change who I am and to disavow like me, then I obviously don't belong in that program. I don't belong in that field, right?
okay,
So my hijab doesn't have anything to do with how I treat patients. I'm not covering my hands.
right.
I'm operating with my hands. So I don't understand why I have to change who I am to do my job. So I think having, the people who were trying to discourage me from, not necessarily discourage me, but like be realistic with me to say, these are the challenges you're going to face. You're asked to do this. What would you do? Kind of prepared me for that. And the second thing, I've been through civil war in Somalia,
Yeah,
seeing, my grandmother get injured, going through all those things, the way I saw what I was going through a training program, having the privilege to go to medical school and then
hmm,
going through a residency where I was learning the art and science of surgery and how to take care of really sick patients. I saw that as an opportunity, and everything else, people who would say about me, about, my hijab or whatever, that's something that I could just, shrug off,
yeah.
keep going forward, because like hardship is what
Resilience,
people
right?
consider,
Building
yeah,
resilience. Yeah, you're
exactly.
obviously very resilient person.
Yeah, and I think that was the thing that I had more than anything else, is that perspective. Like,
Yeah,
I've seen true hardship. I've seen true suffering. I've seen a family member, my, beloved grandmother, like I've seen her suffer. I've seen bad things,
right,
right?
right.
And someone making comments or snarking at me or my hijab, like in the big scheme of things, when I look at it from that perspective, in the big scheme of things, it was something that I could just shrug off and say, you know what? It's not that big of a deal. I can keep moving on. Basically, I think I just grew a thick skin
Mm.
and I just learned to pick my battles. Having that fight and arguing with people who aren't going to have a huge impact on my overall outcome, I saw it as a waste of time, basically. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So I think that was the bigger thing, is having had those other experiences, I could say, you know what, this is just who I am. And unless you have a good reason to tell me to take off my hijab, then we can move on. Right.
I
I
love it.
think that was one of the biggest things, is I used kind of, these issues, the fact that, I was wearing a hijab and the fact that I was having kids, to kind of motivate me to be a really good student, to be a really good resident, like to basically armor myself up with my medical knowledge and my patient care to make sure that I do a good job, so that they don't have any ammunition to come after me for whatever other reason, right?
Right.
Because it's so easy for people to point out and say, see, because she's having kids, because she's a minority, or, whatever reason
Right.
they want to come up with, that's why she's doing poorly on her test. That's why she's, her patient care is not that great. That's why she can't answer questions.
It's almost like people go out of their way, it seems like, to put obstacles in front of your path just so they can go back and reaffirm their own, biases about you, against you, and
Yeah.
say, see, I told you so, you failed.
Yeah. I remember this, actually, it was so funny. Like, I remember there was a time when we'd go up there and we would presenting at M&Ms and morbidity and mortality, where you talk about your complications and your
Hmm.
patient deaths and, whatever. And I remember someone went before me and they had, a horrible complication where it was, a technical failure. Somebody was trying to go in the chest and instead went into somebody's belly and put a
Okay.
spear through, like put something through their spleen, and the
Wow,
patient had
like a big
surgery.
mistake. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was a technical error,
Hmm.
basically. And they were like, okay, so what's the overall rate of this kind of stuff happening in the literature? Yeah, what did you learn from it? Okay, all right. Person step back down. I go up there and I'm presenting one of my complications. Somebody got a wound infection, right? It's
Okay.
very frequent. It happens all the time, especially in our diabetic patients. It happens all the time, right?
Hmm.
I was asked one of the hardest questions that room has ever seen.
Wow.
I was asked, what would you do to prevent a surgical site infection at the molecular level while you're in the operating room?
What? The molecular level?
At the molecular
Wow,
level.
that is bench years. That's no, that is not clinical stuff. That's like you're not a
So
microbiologist.
so I'm like, you know what though? Alhamdulillah, this was like I think my fourth year, I think. And by this time I think I had three kids and I've been on maternity leave and I knew, there was gonna be a lot of, okay, see, you took time off for kids, you took time off for this and blah blah blah. Like there was gonna be I knew I was always gonna get the hard questions and I've always gotten the hard questions. But alhamdulillah, all the sick time that I have, I sat down and I read and I read and I read. And I had no idea I was even capable of answering it, but it was like some weird thing. Like it's a big push to decrease surgical site infections. And I remember reading an article about it. And I remember one of my faculty looking at me like, what in the world is that? And I kind of randomly like started citing things that I read
Mhm.
randomly. I'm like, is that what it was? I didn't even know what the question, like what exactly they were looking for. But I started naming random things. And alhamdulillah, it ended up being right.
Oh,
But
you were prepared.
it's called like the skip criteria or something like that. The
Yeah,
kind of things, you normalize patients' blood sugars, you
right,
make sure they're oxygenated well, you make sure they're not hypothermic, to make sure that the tissue is being oxygenated, silly things.
right.
But the way they ask it is, it's a common thing that we do all the
They
time, but the
wanted to
way they
trip
ask
you
it,
up.
it's like,
They wanted
it's a
to,
trick.
yeah, they wanted you to fail that question. That was hard on purpose. Yes.
And I didn't realize this until way afterwards, and I was done and I was done with my boards, is all those obstacles made me push harder, made me a better physician, made me a better,
Mashallah.
clinician, made me a, better person, you know, because I don't think of it of, oh, somebody's going to ask me a question. Is I think of it as if I don't know this information, it may affect the patient's outcome,
Right,
right?
right,
And the thing that I learned from that is take whatever obstacles you get and see how it can push you to be better yourself.
right.
The hijab, was it an obstacle? Yeah, but what did it do? It just made me, a little bit more tough. It gave me
Yeah.
a tough skin. And, and now I'm going to get to the funny things. So
Okay.
I remember I walked into a patient's room,
Okay.
demented old lady, had a head injury. And, every morning we walk in and we ask them, where are you today? What date is it? To assess their mental status. And I walk in and she looks at me and she goes, I thought I was in America.
Probably in America in, 1970, probably where her memory, is.
I think she sees me with my hijab and she's like, I thought I was in America. And I'm like, well,
Right.
she's oriented at least, right?
Right.
She's oriented to place. And I remember everybody in that room just like their eyes popping out of their heads. And I'm like, guys, it's funny. You can laugh.
Yeah. This one's kind of funny.
It's hilarious. And then I remember I had this young guy who was a veteran and he has like a really bad hemorrhoid. And I'm, trying to examine him and he can't sit. And so I'm like examining him, making sure he doesn't have anything, in his canal or whatever. And I'm like, hey, I have to excise this. I'm going to cut it out. I'm going to suture you up. You're going to be fine. And as I'm doing his rectal exam, my finger is in his bottom. Okay.
Right.
He says, have you ever read the Bible? I think it will change your world. And
Oh my goodness. Awkward.
I'm like, sir, let me get my finger out of your bottom and we can have, a religious discussion, all night long.
I'm in the middle of a sterile exam right now. It's not the time to discuss this topic.
Yeah.
That's funny. Oh my goodness.
And that's the thing. If I got upset every single time someone, said something about my hijab or, my religion or whatever, I'd be mad all day, every day. So I learned to say, you know what, this is me. It's not going to change, right? I'm
Absolutely.
comfortable with it. And, if there are people who will look and, have a question and I welcome the questions, I open it up. And when they say, oh, where are you from? I tell them where I'm from. I tell them, they ask me if I was born a Muslim or if I converted. Like we sit there and we talk about religion. I've talked about religion to patients and we've talked about how similar our religions are and the different, the same things that we practice and the same things that we believe in. We sit there and we talk about like people that I've had a guy whose dad was really sick in my ICU and, he was on the verge of death and we worked on him all night long. And the next day, the guy's doing fine, waking up. And this guy, he comes and he gives me a hug and he's like, Doc, I got to tell you, if I saw you outside of this setting, I probably wouldn't talk to you. I probably would say something bad about you. But, this interaction made me, question everything that I believe in.
Wow.
So I think being open and having an honest discussion with people is what ultimately will, make slow changes, right?
Absolutely. A prejudice and bias, these things flourish in ignorance. It's,
Yep.
being around Muslims, just that act, really
Yep.
throws down a lot of that awful perceptions, that some Americans walk around with. So that's telling. Yeah. So just being out there and just, walking on earth, doing your thing, being a professional Muslim woman and wearing it proudly, you'll be changing people's minds.
Definitely, you will. And that's the thing. I think when you're constantly defensive, you don't get far with that.
Yeah.
You're constantly defending, well, I
Or
believe in
reactive,
this.
defensive and reactive. Yeah.
And exactly. And one of the things that, I do at my hospital is, we all get together and we talk about, the different things that we have in common. There are a lot of people that I work with that have never left their small town. And they're like, okay, so what kind of foods do you eat? It always comes down to food. So what we do is actually we do potlucks. And I bring them like Somali food and we talk about the different things that we do during Ramadan.
Yeah.
They know that, I make samosas and all this stuff and they all prepare for it. They're like, where are samosas?
Yeah. Those are delicious.
So, yeah, they are. So I think, sharing a part of our culture and our heritage and our beliefs, I think that the misconception is that people think that Muslims are out to convert everybody. Nobody has time for that.
Just exactly. Nobody has time for that. Yeah.
No, we're just trying to survive. We're just trying to live our lives. But I think if everybody is locked into, their belief systems and their perceptions and they never open their minds and get to know, what's outside of their circle of influence, then I think that's where prejudice and ignorance will grow.
Yeah.
So that's why I think first I had to be comfortable with myself. And I think that was one of the biggest hurdles and the biggest struggles. And once I was comfortable with myself and I'm, accepting of the fact that the hijab is what makes me comfortable with my identity and that's how I am most confident, then I can be free to wear it, explain it. And it's not always going to be happy go lucky. I've had people who, as soon as they see me, say, absolutely not, we want somebody else.
Right. I want a different doctor. Yeah.
I want a different doctor. And initially, when you're a physician and when you're a professional and someone, says, no, I don't want you taking care of me, it does
it bothers you.
It bothers you and it bothers your confidence,
Of course.
your self-esteem. Is it your expertise? Now you're being prejudiced, even though you've accomplished what you wanted and you've proven yourself, you're still being prejudiced. I got to a point where I said, you know what? I'm comfortable in my skills.
Yep.
I'm comfortable in my expertise.
Yep.
If somebody else doesn't want me to taking care of them just because of who I am and what I wear and what my name is, then it's not on me.
Right.
Right? I mean, a lot of women go through this. A lot of women surgeons complain about this. A person will come to their clinic and when they see that, the surgeon
is female
that they're consulting with is women, they're like, no, I want the man surgeon.
Yeah. So this is sexism playing into it as well.
It's sexism playing in. So am I going to sit there and think less of myself because somebody doesn't want me taking care of them? Absolutely not. It takes a while to get over that hump as well. But I got to a point where I just said, you know what? Your perception isn't going to have any bearing on my self-confidence.
Yeah, absolutely. Right? Well said.
And that's what it is. And it happens to so many women, so many women.
Oh, yeah, especially in the professional world. I definitely relate to that. And I agree with you. It is something that kind of develops with time. I think as you go from being a novice in your profession to becoming an expert, you kind of grow in confidence and you realize, you know what? Other people's negative opinions of you or your skills, that's their problem. That's their issue. And it's, your shoulders. It's just, whatever.
It happens on flights. I mean, an African-American woman stands up, when a doctor is called for, and a flight attendant says, no, I'm looking for a real doctor.
I remember that story. That was a horrible
and multiple
story.
stories. Multiple stories. It happened in JetBlue. It happened in Delta, right? it happens to so many women that there's still the stereotype of, oh, a doctor is supposed to be a white male,
Right.
right? And,
Absolutely.
and when you go back and read these stories of women talking about it on social media, there was a woman on an airplane who's like an internal medicine doc standing there trying to take care of the patient, and instead they're talking to a male who's a radiologist who hasn't even touched a patient for like 10, 15 years. And
Right.
she's like,
Hello.
like I'm the one who takes care of patients every day. This guy sits in a dark room reading CAT
Yeah,
scans.
yeah, absolutely. And it's the
So
biases that are constantly informing people. Yeah,
I think over time we have to change, society's perceptions, and these things we have to speak about them and obviously raise that they are concerns because they continue to happen on
yeah,
a daily basis, right?
yeah,
I mean, imagine if you were the person on that flight,
yeah,
right? And you
yep,
needed help. Who do you want taking care of you?
right. You just want the person with the expertise, right, to take care of you.
Exactly. Exactly. No
Yeah,
matter what they look like. And that's the sad thing, is that we still have one mold, one
right,
stereotype for what a physician should be or what we expect them to be. A lot of young women growing up in an area where, like I grew up, where there's not much diversity and you're
right.
kind of like the sore thumb that, that sticks out
Yeah,
that now has a hijab on it. I
yeah,
think that was one of the biggest things, is not having that to say, okay, it's prejudice and not me. For a long time, you say, no, it's me, it's me, it's me, until the very end, you're like,
right,
no, it wasn't me this
right.
whole time.
Absolutely. You're right. What a great discussion today.
What would you tell a young woman right now
Oh,
who's struggling with that part of her identity?
oh, that's a
You
good
know,
question. I would say it's really important to surround yourself with people who lift you up. I think having a close circle of family or friends who give you an uplifting message, because family themselves could be providing negative message if they think you're in a place where you're bound to get hurt, so it's not
right,
necessarily coming from a bad place, but you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't pursue that goal, because it's too hard and people will discriminate against you. So you don't want those voices. You probably should keep those kind of voices at bay if you can.
right,
And those people who lift you up, I think those kinds of relationships can really be a source of confidence. When you have a cheerleader, in your camp,
right.
I think that really helped you. How about you? What would you advise young women?
When your back is up against the wall, and a lot of times you'll be in a spot where things are pretty much out of your hands,
Right.
the thing I used to say under my breath all the time is tawakkal ala Allah,
Tawakkal ala
right?
Allah. Yep.
Yeah, trust in Allah, and everything else, I mean, you do your best. You do
Yeah.
the very best that you can, and everything else, Allah will take care of,
Yeah.
right? And then the second thing, as far as deciding, whether the hijab is right for you or not, I think what we need to say over and over and over and over and establish it as a norm in our society
Right.
is the fact that at the end of the day, it's a woman's choice,
Absolutely. It's your
right?
it's your choice. Yeah, it's and
It's
her alone.
exactly. And whatever choice that you make, it's between you and Allah. None of us, we are all human beings, and we're
Right.
all practicing our deen the best way that we possibly can,
Right.
right? Whatever is in our hearts and however we practice and whatever we do, Allah sees it.
Right.
We're all human beings and we're all trying to do our best. And to people who are the enforcers, our society, who are the enforcers, who feel like compelled to tell a Muslim woman that, hey, where's your hijab? Or, why are you wearing a hijab? Aren't you a modern Muslim? Why are you being oppressed? I think those are the messages that we need to fight.
Yeah.
However, we want to wear the hijab, whether we want to wear it or not, right? It's between us and Allah, right? So any woman who's struggling with it, find out what makes you comfortable, right?
Absolutely.
Put it on, try it on. Are you comfortable? Are you not comfortable? How do you feel? Like, what's compelling you towards it? What's compelling you against it?
Yeah.
It's a spiritual decision. I believe it's a spiritual decision.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Whatever, however you want to wear it, it's between you and Allah. It's a spiritual decision. And I think we should caution against people who try to act as the enforcers.
Yes.
Okay. And
Absolutely.
say, and I think that's what we need to fight more than
Yeah.
anything else, right? Because not only is it a difficult decision to make, I think the difficulty is amplified when everybody else feels like they have a say in how you carry yourself, in what you wear,
Oh, 100% true. 100%.
right?
Yeah.
And it's not just hijab, right? It's a sexism thing,
Yes.
right? I remember we were talking about it at a women's conference that I went to. They want you to act, when you're in a professional setting, they want you to act dress professionally, in a pantsuit or a skirt suit or whatever,
Right.
and not wear makeup, because if you wear makeup and you dress feminine, then you're being girly and nobody's going to listen to you. It's society's wish to control women. The conversation that we need to take back to say it's not something that you have an input in.
Absolutely. Yes.
And I think we need to empower our young women to say whatever decision you make sure that you are confident enough in standing up and defending your decision,
Yeah.
and that you shouldn't come to oh, I have to wear the hijab because people told me to. You wear the hijab because you want to.
Yes.
If you don't want to wear it, that's your decision.
Yeah.
You feel confident enough in defending whatever decision you make and standing up for yourself and speaking up for yourself.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think that mixed messages are going to come and people will have their opinions and their judgments. But at the end of the day, the deen is between you and Allah. Your faith is between you and Allah.
Exactly.
Yes. All right.
Yes, that was a very deep conversation.
Yes.
I hope you guys enjoyed it.
Yes. And, we have a lot more to talk about, don't we?
We do. So once this podcast is up, we will have a Facebook page, and we will invite you guys to carry on the conversation on our Facebook page, and also leave suggestions for any other topics you would like us to discuss at future podcast episodes.
Yes. Thank you for being with us and joining in on this very important topic.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Good night, guys.
Thank you for tuning into the Professional Muslim Women Podcast, the place for Muslim women to inspire and be inspired.
Please join us on our Facebook group, Professional Muslim Women, to continue the conversation and connect with Muslim women like you. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and drop us a like or a review.
We look forward to hearing from you soon.